My name is Daniel, and last year I built a cabin in the woods. But this year I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna try to rebuild this old wooden sailboat that I found in a scrapyard. So I just pulled out the wet piece of oak here that was strengthening the bridge between the keel and the stem. So now I can see the keel bolts here. I'm gonna have to replace that piece when I get those nails out, but I can do that when the bulkheads are in place, so I'm gonna leave that for now. So I have a huge decision to make here. I'm trying to make the front cabin as small as possible so I can make the main cabin with a full height as big as possible. And the smallest I can go to make a usable V-berth is at this beam here. The original wall or bulkhead was here, and there was also an extra beam here. So I don't know. Oh, and the main mast was here. So to get a better idea of the mast position, I marked the length on the tent poles. And that says that the main mast was located about 1 meter in front of the one from my sketch. That is pretty much on a 9.6 meter boat. It's a big difference. And since the main was not mounted when I got her, I never thought about the position of it, but it was here anyway. And it's supposed to go here according to the sketch. So this is where the mast is positioned, or was positioned when I bought her. Pretty much there where my finger is. And it's supposed to go here according to my gut feeling. I think it looks a lot better. But now, again, I know nothing of sailboats, I know nothing of sailing. So I went down the rabbit hole to understand the position of the main mast, and it pretty much unlocked sailing to me. I'm going to make this argument, and if you find anything wrong with it, please tell me in the comments. So if this piece of wood represents the boat, if I push it in the back here, it will turn to the right. And if I push it in the front, it will turn to the left. Now, if I would push it a bit further towards the center, in the front or in the back, it would do the same thing, but we would find a line or a point where it is balanced. Now, that balance point is what boat people call CLR, and that is the center of lateral resistance. And everything about sailing is referring to that point in the hull. Now, of course, the CLR on this piece of wood is the result of the friction between the wood and the table, where the CLR on a boat is a result of the underwater profile of the hull pushing against the water. And let's also add CE, that is the center of effort, which is the point on where the force of all the sails balance. So it's not working on the same axis as the CLR, but it's an opposite force. And on this rig design that I stole from Kasten Design, and that I also love so much, the CE is marked for every individual sail and also in total fully sheeted. Sailors are talking about boats having weather helm, which means that they veer windward, or in language that I understand, they steer into the wind. And as you can see, that is because the CE is behind the CLR, pushing the back of the boat. The opposite is what they call lee helm, and that would be if the CE is in front of the CLR. If the two forces are aligned, that would be what they call a balanced boat. So, changing the position of the main mast is pretty daunting, as it could give her horrible weather helm if I move it too far back. The problem here is we don't know where the CLR is. If she was in the water, I could easily do the same pushing as I did on the piece of wood, and I would find out, but now I have to guess. And it would be a bit arrogant even for me to assume that I have a better feeling for the CLR than the guys that built her. But we don't know how she was rigged. Perhaps she was a schooner with a main sail on the back, pushing on the aft and balancing her exactly on the CLR where I think it should be. That would put the main mast in that position. Or perhaps she was not built to be carrying all that sail over the bow that I plan on with the long bowsprit. And there's also plenty of ways to trim the balance when the masts are in position, tilting them, and of course the area of all those different sails. And being a split rig with two masts makes those adjustments a bit easier. Then this what I just learned session, apparently this is also what sailing is all about. The CE of that rig is just imaginary. It's the result of an engineer freezing something as changing as wind in time. And all that tugging in rope, taking down different sails and tightening stuff and letting them flutter that sailors do is all about moving the CE during that condition and direction to balance on the CLR. So I'm not worrying so much about the main mast anymore, and I started to consider the aesthetics. And as much as I would like a big house in the middle with a lot of standing height and less deck to build in the front, a big foredeck is very, very pretty. It also gives her much better proportions. So not only the mast is moving aft, so is the front wall of the house with more than a meter. I think that would look beautiful, and hopefully she will perform too. Ja, det är den med dig kocka. Ja. Oj. So I've been doing some tests here to find out what kind of finishes I want on the oak beams, and well, this was empty, so I couldn't use it. This is Moorish teak, something I found in the garage. We got wax oil that doesn't do very much. This is also wax, decor wax. I don't know what's the difference. Doesn't make much difference to the finish. And then we got floor oil, which I don't know what it is. It doesn't say on the can. It's just some kind of linseed oil, I guess. And then we got some boiled cheap linseed oil. I did kind of like the Moorish teak if it was a bit more, if it had a bit more gloss on it. So I'm going to treat it again with some linseed oil. Second treatment to see if I can get more gloss. I do like this finish, but it's not for the V-berth because we're going Scandinavian, but perhaps for the main saloon. So I'm gonna remember this, and perhaps I'll use it later. Okay, so here's the experiment so far. So this is white pigment on oak, and this is more like it. And on the plywood, we have white pigment here, only. White pigment with tongue oil after. We got tongue oil, and then we got tongue oil with a second treatment of white pigment here. I think this is it. It's a bit darker in the dark spots and a bit lighter on the light spots, so a bit more contrast. Here's what a finished beam would look like. That white pigment on the oak, sanded and pretty much done. It's not my favorite stain, but I think it would look good in that Scandinavian style that we are going for. This might be a good point to tell you that the upper side of those beams are not faired yet. They're just rough cut. I'm gonna fair them when I put the deck planks on. And also everything is dry fitted, so it's gonna come out again before I do the final fitting, so you know. Since everything is coming down, I'm gonna reuse some of the screws that I took from disassembling her. Here's another problem that no one except me cares about. So I put the first bulkhead on the front side of the frame, and now I'm thinking of strengthening that so that the frame doesn't twist. And the way to do that would be probably to put something in the back of it too, just on top, so I don't steal space from the storage. I made the first bulkhead in oak, right, and I'm now building the second and third. The fourth is in plywood, and I was thinking of building the second and the third in plywood too, but now I don't know. It just struck me that the third bulkhead is going to be seen from the main cabin, so it's going to appear to be a part of the main cabin and not a part of the front cabin. So that white stained plywood that would fit in the front cabin is not going to look good from the main cabin. So now I'm thinking about building all of them in oak, and that's a lot of work. And there's one more thing that I want to be clear about before building the last bulkheads here, and that's this space here, because it's supposed to be a V-berth, but right here I want to have a nightstand that I can lift off and somehow use it to make the V-berth a double.